Hi, my name is Allison Fletcher. I teach English and Comm either here or at Buffalo. I wanted to...
Brief card interruption. Will the person parked out in the parking lot with a light blue Toyota license plate number EXK with a rubber ducky on the dashboard please report to the front admissions desk? Thank you.
I have a light blue Toyota, but I don't have a rubber ducky on the dashboard, so I'm scared for a
Well,
second.
that person, Allison, that person isn't having as much trouble as Ken.
I guess
I'm
not.
having car problem, his
Oh.
car broke down, he's gonna try to get her.
Okay, all right, good. So I do a ton of this stuff all the time with my students. I wanted to choose one particular activity to have you do today because I think it can adapt to a lot of different things that people do or different subjects and stuff like that. So I'm going to kind of get right into that with you, and then afterwards I'll share with you some other activities that I think worked well with me. But we're going to spend most of our time with me kind of doing this activity with you. The thing that I like to think about with flipped learning, I think a lot of times when you first read about it, or if you just Google it or something like that, the first thing that comes up is the students do their homework in class and they do their lectures at home. I mean, which is true, kind of, but I think that there's sort of a lot more to it than that. So I think if someone looks at it and sees that, they think, well, you know what, it doesn't completely explain exactly what it is. So I like to just think of it, and Rick was mostly talking about this a little bit before, but I like to think of it that any of those higher order thinking skills, that's what they do in class. And then anything lower on that pyramid is what they do at home. So for me, that's sort of a wider kind of definition that I think gets to the most important points of it for us. So the activity that we're going to do today, I do kind of variations of this all the time. I even do a variation of this on the first day of classes as kind of an icebreaker. But it's sort of a fresh way to work with any reading assignment that they have, whether it's an article, a chapter in the text, you know, anything that they have to read for that class. And I really like this because it gets them to personalize the material kind of right away. It gets them interacting with each other. It gets them evaluating their own responses, evaluating other people's responses, gets them synthesizing information and thinking critically about the reading sort of very quickly. It also gets them to get up and move around a little bit, which is usually pretty helpful. And especially at the beginning of class, it helps them kind of form relationships with one another. So I think that was the intro that I wanted to say for it. It works best if, as Rick was saying before, if it's something that they've read prior to that class as a homework assignment or something like that. And then obviously if there's points that you want them to focus on, give them that first. Though I think it's okay, I think, to just sort of run with this and go if for some reason you couldn't do that, but it is best if they've read the assignment prior to this. The one that I'm giving you today is from an article called "Is Google Making Us Stupid?" by Nicholas Carr. I chose that because I know at least a lot of the liberal arts faculty have read that already or have taught that already. I teach it a lot. So basically his idea in this article, which is actually getting kind of outdated, I should choose something else, but I think it's from like 2008, which has now been a while ago. His basic idea is that overuse of the internet is changing the way our brains work, making it more difficult for us to focus on any sort of deeper thinking, deeper reading kind of activity. And so that's what I would kind of start out with, just a very general, this is the main argument in this article, and then kind of let them go with it. Like I said, hopefully they've read it before. So what I would like you to do is grab a partner, and I'm going to give you and your partner a quote or an excerpt from this article to work with, to start us off with. So, should have enough time. Rick, are you going to join us?
I can if you need.
Yeah, why not?
3, 5, 7. Sure.
Okay. So find someone to work with, I'll give you. I'll tell you what to do with this in a second.
Oh, find one over there.
One of my students. Did I get to everybody? Yes? Okay, so the only thing for you to do right now is take about 3 or 4 minutes, read your quote with your partner, and talk to them about what you think of it and how it relates to those major ideas we pointed out in the article, okay?
It's just sort of one.
And I think that's what it's saying, is that the assumption that would be better off is what they're arguing against. But the part that
Yeah, even if you're already trying to like read the parts that's distracting, there's so many things flashing on the side.
New question?
What are you doing for stuff in play?
Oh, so you weren't listening. The instructions.
We're bad students.
Miss Cleo.
That's right, I just had a whole day of
Very
that.
dangly.
I just read it and talk to each other. That's all I put
But there's a lot more thought going on in our brain.
This comes from that article by Fire, right? Yeah, listen to that.
Yeah, I Yeah.
Right, you gotta start now.
My stuff.
Nope, not yet, just talk. Take about 30 seconds to finish up, please.
I teach
Slightly related versus just.
Yeah, it's true. Because there's more than.
Okay, let's come together, please. So during that first time where the partners are meeting with one another, I'd like to let them kind of be on their own to talk for a little while. I do sort of walk around the room and listen to what they're saying or try to overhear a little bit, so then I know what I might want to focus on later a little bit, or if there's some issue that they're having or something like that. But for the most part, I like to let them sort of be on their own with that to begin with. So the next thing that you're going to do is, once I'm done explaining, get up and meet with at least 2 other pairs. I'd like you to compare your thoughts on your quote with their thoughts on their quote, see how your ideas relate to one another, and see how they relate to the article as a whole. If you don't really have to take notes. If it was a real class, I would ask them to take some notes as to the major ideas that came up in their discussions, so we can talk about it later. If you want to take notes, you can. You don't have to for today, okay? But get up, make sure you meet with at least 2 other pairs. Again, talk about how your ideas relate to one another and how they relate to the article as a whole. Okay? Go ahead. Yeah, okay. another group to talk to?
Oh, we're actually,
Oh, you're talking
Oh,
to
yeah.
them?
We're gonna actually work all together, yeah.
Yeah.
What we were doing is just exchanging each other's posts and like looking at them first.
That's their code.
See, that goes against what you say. Because it's not a bug to be fixed, you want to keep that one, because it's a problem. Right?
So now, this is kind of the opposite, because that's saying that the brain is so outdated that it can't handle all this information. This article is saying that because we're getting used to handling so much information at one time, we need to start updating how much is going on to keep us interested.
Right, and that's what I, you guys all might have some, do you know, like,
I can definitely see that. Yeah, actually, I used to, but looking at this one, especially this first paragraph.
I do find myself kind of losing interest in whatever article we're going.
And if there's a starting point and then there's a kind of depth.
Because I don't share the
There are all these other things,
experience.
we're constantly having these
Work for an hour.
of information that's trying to fill you up. So.
No.
Approach that, let's first analyze, okay, this is the situation, this is working for you.
Oh, no, that's
These
not right.
things,
That's
maybe
right.
let's see as distractions. To not, you know,
It's
kind of
more
modify
like
it.
format. Yeah, I guess.
Or start using it as a benefit. Because.
Yeah, 'cause I kind of read like the summary abstract, I'm like,
And my ability to. And, so I see it as like, we're not gonna change the way the technology is set up, it's constantly gonna be like this. So instead of, in terms of education, getting students to understand that, this is the way that their brain is encountering all this. And that there is a.
It's funny that I would give, this one, they teach marketing, and, there's a thing called selective perception and selective retention. And those are two topics I was talking about, it's the brain choosing what it wants to take in, and what it wants to recognize, or what it wants to discard, right? So, yeah, like what you're saying, it has to be, we as people have to decide if we're, if we're gonna, like with this, it's saying like the screen pop-ups and stuff, are we gonna pay attention to every single little thing, or are we just gonna focus on the email we're reading and keep going?
No, I'm talking about the short, like the fact that
It's
they
so good, it's
describe
not gonna want to work out. And, but now we know, fast food is bad. So now this is basically fast food information, or fast food. That is so,
Yeah, we want it fast, and we want it easy, and we want it cheap, right?
Yeah, and to stimulate all those, like,
But we know better,
Yes.
if something's fast and easy and cheap, then it's probably not as good as good, if we had to put some effort into it.
So you're saying
Watching
quantity,
Channel 2
where they're at,
in the
except the
morning,
fact
you see the
that
schools
they're not
closed,
gonna
they have
concentrate
the
on
problem. And if the schools aren't closing, you think it's just a problem.
I didn't know that was text route. I didn't know that was
So now you have the news and you wanna watch the news, you see someone's wondering, but they're using nothing to do with the crawl. And then you read the crawl and it's like,
Wait a second.
what am I looking at? Or am I listening?
Take a moment to finish up your conversation, and then please find another group to meet with.
Your task, I can't focus on every task. So I tried it too, but you said
Right, all the
The
white
noise,
noise,
right?
yeah.
And that's why I think that this one.
The person
Yeah.
paying
because
attention,
this
you
is-
gave them a 20, they give you the
because
wrong
we're
change
looking
back.
at, we're putting
Or if they're
very
on their cell
valuable
phone on the side, you're
accumulation
missing
of all
the
these small
eyeballs all the
facts.
time.
You
Yeah, your
know,
cell phone is supposed to
I think
take you
that's
into the
what
room,
we're trying to get
and now they're 10
Instead of
minutes
saying,
behind.
here's all your facts, like, for instance, like, Pakistan is up with India.
You have to try
Okay,
to
that's a fact.
balance like
You know,
that.
like,
You need to
now,
try to
what
do
does that
some
actually mean?
reprogramming.
You know, what's that
Somehow,
gonna
because they
affect
do
voting
believe that the
prices,
internet
the
is
economy, a lot of stuff is
chipping
based on
away
it.
at that one.
Embargoes, trade.
Well,
some of
absolutely.
the guy at Ford.
Exchange rates, exactly. And that's why this part of the article, they're arguing against the fact that they're saying the brain is outdated, because it has to be, it has to eliminate ambiguity, but that's human nature, is to take in all the ambiguity and use it to our advantage. Like she was saying about how there gets a bug. If you know something about, like she was using the example, you go ahead and say it, because it was
About which one?
about water.
Oh,
Like, you know about water, but
you talked about, she made a comment about water.
Or water
And
rangers
she
to,
talked about it
extra
being
credit.
a local, like not a problem, but greater
Oh,
amount.
when you're talking about,
Yeah,
Some of the
yes.
topics,
a greater amount.
you may not have.
We live near fresh water,
Such
so it's not a
depth
concern
with
for us,
too.
but
I mean, even
when you
with some
go
of
around
the
the
projects,
country, you know, in
it's
California or
a
down
very,
south or
really
whatever,
short
they don't
question.
have
We have
access
to
to
find
much fresh
short
water, so there's a,
for,
like a shortage of supply and
you
they
know,
want
instead of, unfortunately, people
you
may
know,
not use
they
the
control how much
library
they can
for
use and stuff, whereas
osteoporosis,
we
for
have the
disease,
luxury
we
of
can just go to
using
the
how much
clinic.
we ever.
All
But
the questions
with
are
what
right
you
there.
had said, she's basing it on lot
So,
patterns, like she
that
must
might be
have
an
saw
argument.
the waters
Yeah.
and
End of this whole
read
Yeah.
something in the news
Spoken to
or
people who live other places.
Or reading more than
you
that.
have a knowledge base,
Final essay,
and
but
if you were to research, I would
a lot more
imagine
teachers
her
are getting shorter
basis of
assignments.
knowledge would
from
say,
our
well, look at
strike throat
your
course.
account, you know, look at local
They have
water,
to pick one
look at
for the
why
portfolio
it's, you know,
or that
you're
kind of thing.
basing
It's not that
conclusions
assessment,
on,
that doesn't mean
this
that's
is a good
one
place to
test.
live based
No,
on
when I hear
water.
someone
You would
sign
say,
10
well, it's
page
better
paper,
than
yeah.
water.
We used to
Yeah.
have,
You
you
know,
know,
we
we
talk
talk
usually
usually
on our
our
way
ways
to,
to page
once
papers,
there's
and now
enough,
we have.
you know,
And it's where the big things get down there, whereas up here, not so much.
but your law.
My college, my students, I mean, like, it's like, readers, like, they
Well,
are not able to
she's
provide
tempted.
information or
Yeah.
But you have a
Never.
Yeah.
Like, I give them like, I give like a 5-page paper, and they're like, oh my god, I never written that much.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
I have two
about
talking
the
high schoolers too,
research
and I
on
can
water?
give them a
What do you
3-page
think you would
paper.
pick out? What do you think
They-
selective?
yeah,
is?
they-
I think it's gonna take them all.
This
summer.
is
Yeah.
selective retention,
It's
kind of
3 pages.
selective
It's like
on,
they've never touched it.
selective retention is selective perception.
Perception.
And I
So
was
what do you
thinking,
think you would, if you were to look that up?
Yeah, I
what do you
think
think?
a
I
lot
mean,
of
it's
people
best.
do more on
it depends on where you're from.
Right.
Like being from here and hearing about all the other places' problems, I'm selectively retaining that this place is much better to live than those other places, but if you're from there, then you go, well, that's not truly the case because they may know something I don't know,
Right,
and so they're
right.
selectively, you know, not perceiving my argument, and they're saying, no, this is better, you know? So it's kind of funny that.
You guys kind of did really well. I mean, normally, you know, normally I would have the students meet with some other people. I think you kind of get the idea with it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
pretty much already engaged. So after I have them meet with some other groups and take some more time with it, I'll bring the class back together as a larger group, and then what I do from there kind of varies depending on what I want that actual outcome to be. A lot of times we can then move into a larger discussion, because at that point I've heard a little bit of what they're saying, so I can ask them things like, you know, how did you respond to some of your partners? I know which quotes I gave out, so I can call on them to read a portion of that and then have someone else respond to it. I like to, they get mad at me because I ask them why all the time, but I like to ask them, okay, well then why did you have that response that you did? And we talk about that. So at this point, they're really well prepared to have a deeper sort of, it's sort of funny because the article is all about how we're not capable of this deeper kind of thinking anymore, but they're much more prepared to have that sort of conversation than they would have been if they hadn't already gone through this type of activity. So I find that then the larger group discussion, they get so much more out of it because they're prepared for it. They've already interacted with one another about the material, they've already personalized their piece of it on whatever quote they had, and so then it's more memorable for them. So, and I do, like I said, I do different variations of that kind of all the time with things. The other flipped kind of strategies that I do with them, this one goes along with what Rick was saying with the writing before. I do a lot of work with them with anonymous responses. You know, I might start the class with a couple of questions for them to write the answers to, or I might give them an image or a quote or a little video to watch, and then just have them write on a half sheet of paper how they would respond to it. Don't put their name on it, and then I'll kind of redistribute them back to different students. I find that they usually will write more and write honestly if they don't know that they're going to have to put their name on it, and then again, they've had a chance to write about it, personalize it themselves, then they get someone else's response to kind of evaluate and talk about. So, and that I think also is adaptable, just like this other one, to kind of whatever subject that you teach. So I do a lot of that. A lot of times also, I might just put, like an outline of something on the board and tell them to get up and spend the time that they need to fill it in with, again, whatever material they prepared before the class, then they're responsible for getting it started and filling in based on the little bullet points that I gave them and things like that.
So when you do that, they get up to the board.
Mhm.
So do you pick anybody, or, I mean?
It
obviously
depends
not the
on-
whole class, they
well,
go there.
Here, when there's some small classes, sometimes I'll make the entire class get up and stand there if it's maybe only 10, 11,
Okay.
12 students or something like that. They get kind of upset about it sometimes. Some of them don't always want to get up, but no, if it was a larger class, then obviously it would have to be maybe one member from your group can go up and do that. But with a smaller class, yeah, sometimes I would do that. So it depends. Those are the ones that I wanted to share with you today. So what did that question?
How do you respond, or do you ever run into this issue where the students aren't doing what they need to do to come in prepared? And then how do you kind of navigate that?
Well, it depends a lot.
Right.
If it's just a matter of they didn't do whatever pre-work that was, depending on the student, I might just attach them to a group of someone that I knew did know what was going on and do it that way so they would benefit from it. If it was a student where I feel like it was really a chronic issue, I might send them away to go do the reading first. But a lot of times I'll sort of navigate around it so that they can still benefit from the activity, but then at the same time, you have the issue of that not really being fair to the students that are prepared. Sometimes, maybe I would only give classwork grade or credit to the students who were prepared, have some sort of way to assess that at the beginning. That helps, so that's what I do, which is actually one of Chris's ideas, but that's what I do with my college prep students, my 12th graders. They
Which you're actually gonna see, cause I'm pinch hitting.
But yeah, so they basically get their discussion questions checked, just did it or didn't do it at the beginning of class. So then everyone participates in the discussion, but only the students that did their homework got credit for it. And that works pretty well.
Yeah, you really got, if it's important, you gotta put a value on it.
Right.
That's the question that gets asked the most, and in this webinar that I heard yesterday, that was the section that he had the best ideas on. What I was going to do for everybody following this workshop is send out a transcript of what he said. And it's basically the same as what Ali's saying. You gotta put some value in. You don't wanna make it so high stakes that it can make the difference between passing and failing, but what some instructors do is they just give a mark for completion, and that becomes part of their participation mark. Or on occasion, you give them an assignment that you collect, and you tell them that you may tell them you're gonna collect them at times and they don't know when, or you tell them which ones. It depends on your style and your choice. But there's gotta be an incentive there, right? I mean, because if you don't give an incentive, then you're telling them it really isn't important. And you should be my feeling is you should be evaluating the things that you think are the most important. So if getting them to take responsibility for their own learning and come prepared is important to you, which it should be, then you gotta find some way of evaluating. You can't just leave it for people do all these things and then they don't assess them, and they only assess these summative tests. What do those things measure? Just how much you can memorize. But that's not what we're trying to teach them. We're trying to teach them to be responsible for their own learning, to be active learners, to engage, to think critically. So you've got to assess and evaluate those things that you feel are important. I'd be interested, Ali, what other people do when students don't come prepared, when you've got something planned that was dependent on their preparation. Or what do you do to prevent that?
Well, here's 5 minutes, and I didn't do it now.
Yes, good strategy. The teacher thinks, well, I'm supposed to be teaching, I can't give up control and do it now. Don't do that all the time, though, because
Give them some time, and then people already did it, and they're just sitting there.
See, I had questions on my quiz directly from the videos that the students were supposed to prepare, watch before. Direct questions, 2 questions are in the quiz.
if they don't do it,
Well, then if they didn't watch the video, they couldn't get the answer, so.
Are the
But
questions?
then they're in their team also, you know, and sometimes if they're really struggling with some of the questions, they can talk amongst their team to try and get the team members to help to be teachers as well. But then I have students coming to me, and that's what I was thinking too, what Sam was saying. There was one student in particular, she came and she said, every time I come in to sit down and do some work, my teammates are saying, we hope you know this because we don't know any of it. So she had that experience a few times, and she literally asked me, could I please switch teams because my team is not coming prepared to class. So it is challenging. It is really
Quiz every day,
challenging.
Maureen?
Sorry?
How do you do the quizzes where you assess those questions from you?
I just asked a couple questions at the end of the quiz, but what I'm saying is when they're in their teams, the quizzes aren't really considered high stakes for me. You know, it's just, but what I'm trying to do is get the teams to work together, and they can work through what I tell them is work through the quizzes on your own as much as you can. If you need to discuss something with your teammates, if you're not sure about something, you can talk amongst each other. They don't use any resources or anything. But then somebody who watched the video knows those two answers, whereas the other people don't know. So then it was that was challenging. So, but then I hear from the students, they're not prepared. I'm hearing a lot of this now, so this semester.
But that's great where they put pressure on each other.
And that's what I told them. I said, you're gonna run into this in the workforce.
Right.
This is exactly what you're gonna deal with in the workforce, so. So it's interesting.
What
But it
about
is
other-
struggling.
What about other strategies just for flipping you use? Should I? What kind of thing?
For me, I mean, they do like a diagram at one class, and actually the quiz at the next class is on the diagram they did on the previous class. So if they miss that class, they can't do that quiz, and if they miss that quiz, they don't have,
Right.
they're not
So
grading
there's
on
a
that quiz.
consequence for not doing
Yes,
it.
I'm trying to have the attendance issue, trying to
Well,
make
I think we
attend.
all do.
So, so they're forced to attend.
Good, good. Yeah. Others? Mary wants to do something.
I'll say, thinking, like the anonymous response, I was kind of thinking that would be a good one to include, because one thing I started doing this semester was doing like a quarter sheet, and when they read an article, I'll have them like ask questions on the quarter sheet just based on the reading. Or even sometimes I'll just say, take a sentence from the article and turn it into a question. And we can kind of enter in like why the author said that, or like get into more detailed discussion about the article. So I'll collect those at the end of class and then use those the next meeting, and maybe put 5 on the board or something and go off in a discussion in that way. So I think that would be a good one, a good twist on that.
You talked about turning into a question. In one of our workshops on active learning or on assessment, Lana Cerisi, who teaches math, she has the students develop questions for the tests. They develop them. Now, she may add her own too, but think about it. How much you're gonna learn by having to put yourself in the teacher's role, you know? Or the public peer instruction, like we did a little bit of that here with Ali's thing. Kind of each group was kind of teaching the other group what was in their quote. So you learn the most by teaching somebody else. I mean, that's where we learn the most. So even small snippets where you ask someone to explain something. What I try to do is share the things that I've seen our teachers do rather than think that I came up with them. One business teacher that I've seen over the years, and this has become more and more common, he'll assign on a rotating basis each student each week. One student each week has to give an overview of the topic from the chapter. So the introduction is done by the student. And if it's a class of only 5, they might do 3 of them during the course of the thing. It's excellent, because they've got to put themselves in the role, and then the rest of they'll have to prepare questions for the rest of the class. And some of them got to the point where they had to do a little assignment, and he just coaches that. You know, they can contact him between classes through email and so on, say, this is what I've done, what do you think, and ask any other ideas. You know, kind of same thing I do with a lot of our new teachers in terms of helping them. So that's an easy way of doing it.
Yeah, I used to do that with my English 305 classes. I think that especially works for more upper level classes.
This was a 300
for sure.
level class. You're
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
You're
we
right.
did that with them a lot.
Yeah.
The other thing that I forgot to tell you before with this strategy, when they're initially reading their quotes with their partners, if they have, not that I won't answer questions about them, but usually if they don't understand something there or they don't know something, I will have them either, if they were in a computer lab, I'll tell them to look it up, try to figure it out, take out their phone and try to figure it out, something like that. So I try to keep that first part of class as much as possible where I'm not really giving them much of anything, so it's just their own responses. I did this with my Common 150 classes at Buffalo last week, and I had one student in particular the previous weeks. She had just been, I don't know, she had just been giving me a lot of attitude, and I just didn't really know what to do with her, if she was gonna succeed or not. And like the sort of thing where I'd be trying to talk to her, and she'd just sort of be like looking at her computer, and like, okay, I didn't really know what to do. But I did this activity with them, and like all of a sudden she was like part of the class. And she was talking to everybody, and then afterwards she was discussing it. So I don't know, like I think for some students, stuff like this is kind of something where they're really like forced to engage is the only way that like they'll do anything, because she wouldn't listen to me at all the week before. So I don't know. So that I really like this stuff. I think it works really well.
Any other, before we do a short break, any other strategies people want to share?
I have a comment on the questions. For their ticket out the door, they usually just tell me what they learned. In one class, I actually said, come up, turn your notes into a question, ask me the question, and give me the answer. So, I mean, that's some of the knowledge questions you have to do for the exams. And so that helps them to even think of study, like different ways to study, is to turn it into a question.
And you said they come up to you before they leave?
Yep.
Don't you
They're
do
right
that?
out the door.
Check it out the door.
But don't you do it, a lot of people check it out the door, and just collect them on a card.
They have to verbally say it to me.
And I think you do that too.
Yeah,
Each one has to come up.
I learned it from Ashley.
Oh, Ashley's the one that came up with that. That's a great, I haven't seen it in your class, Ashley, but I've seen it in Maureen's. I thought it was great. They actually, it was fun watching them, they're all lined up, waiting, and they're kind of nervous, looking at their questions.
I know, Rick thought it was gonna take forever, we were done like that, right? You said?
Yeah, well, I thought it was great. Thanks for bringing that up.
And another thing, I even brought it to ECC for our labs. I actually asked them a practice lab question before they leave to see if they know the answer.
Like what? What do you mean like a practice lab?
You know, a possible question I can put on their lab test. You know, what hormones released from, pancreas to regulate sugar? You know.
But they have to come up with the question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or I ask them the question before they leave. If they don't know, then go look it up before you leave.
Yeah.
So.
Any others?
They
Okay,
like to
well,
listen to the guy in front of them though.
Mm-hmm.
Then they say,
No.
no, give me something different.
thanks for sharing, and Allison, thank you. Maureen mentioned team building, like working in permanent teams. Chris is gonna fill in, 'cause that's another way of kind of flipping and creating active learning. So after, we'll take about a 5-minute break, the
Thank you.
refreshments
That was
back
very
here.
good.
Oh, thank you.
And then Chris